In this episode of The Different Podcast, Steve Chalk and I explore how our struggle to like and love others is connected to our struggle to like and love ourselves. We talk about the work of the philosopher Martin Buber and reflect on a tweet from Elmo of Sesame Street fame. We explore the impact that knowing we are loved by others can have on what we believe about ourselves. And reflecting on the words of Anthony de Mello, we consider the invitation to behold the one beholding us and smiling. And we try and understand how we can be a conduit for the divine in our relationships with others and how this can change everything. Steve, we're back.
We are.
We've had a little, what's that word?
Interlude,
hiatus. Which is it's a fancy word, isn't it?
A little gap.
But we're back. And this is episode 17. Exciting. And yeah, really looking forward to this. And weirdly, we're recording this in my flat, which is...
You're bringing work all the way home. That's what you do. You've broken the boundaries. You mixed it all up.
I did also just make you a big pile of chilli.
Which was good, and I had 2 bowls.
Yeah.
With lots of cheese.
So...
It was fantastic stuff. I recommend Jill's chilli to anyone. I really do, Jill. It was wonderful.
That's very kind of you. Anyway, it is great to be back recording another episode of our podcast. And I wanted to begin, Steve, and I don't know if you saw it, but in the news this week, it was reported about a tweet from the wonderful Sesame Street character, Elmo, which is bizarre to think that he has his very own Twitter X account.
A fluffy puppet.
A red fluffy puppet. But it was what he tweeted and the response that came that's been really fascinating. And I think that's why it caught the news. So he tweeted out and he just asked people, hey, how's everyone doing?
By the way, it should be a miracle that a puppet can tweet anything.
I'm not quite sure he's got
X
fingers.
it. I suppose you're supposed to say X rather than Twitter.
I know, but...
X, formerly known as Twitter.
Yeah, which is what the BBC do all the time, isn't it? But anyway, so he tweeted out, hi, how's everyone doing? And then there were tens of thousands of people responded and told him how they were doing. Literally, I'm struggling to pay my bills. The world's on fire. I'm really lonely. I don't know what to do. You know, like this just outpouring of angst, which is both an incredible thing that they found a space responding to Elmo, but also a really sad thing, right? Because the suggestion might be that those people don't have someone they can talk to, which is a tragedy, isn't it?
Yeah. Anyone else they can talk to honestly, I suppose, without someone judging them for it. And that. The strange thing is that the other week I had the privilege and the agonizing reality of being one of a couple of people who led the funeral and wake for Camilla Batman-Gayler,
right,
who ran Kids Company, the charity, and then lots of lies were told about lack of financial management and sexual abuse taking place. That charity that work therapeutically with children, caring for them, loving for them on a massive scale. Anyway, Kids Company in 2015 was brought down because of these allegations that were put out by the BBC, on the BBC and in newspapers, etc. Everybody joined in, but I didn't believe them. I knew Camilla a little bit. She'd helped us at Oasis and things.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so in the week or two following all this, I rang her one morning, early, I remember, and about 8:30 in the morning, I said, Camilla, I don't believe all this. Would you like to come and work with Oasis? Because I don't want you to be stranded on your own. And the truth is, she worked alongside us, as you know, for years and helped us with our thinking around all of this stuff. But the point was, she died on January the 1st.
Yeah.
And which was a tragedy. And then I found myself at Oasis big auditorium in Waterloo in London, responsible for a huge overflow for her funeral, hundreds of people, and then a wake. And literally the building was rammed. I mean, it's like extraordinary thing. But what got me was it's a reflection on what you just said about this Elmo story. Members of the family and close friends spoke about her. And then I was the MC, and I made kind of open mic. And I asked people to queue if they wanted to say anything about it. And there's this hugely long queue of people. And they came up one at a time. And each one of them, now adults, because she did this work for a long time, would say things like, if it wasn't for Camilla, I'd be dead.
Wow.
My life's been saved. I'd be in prison. I'd be in hospital for mental illness.
Yeah.
And it went on and on like this. And then this guy, Craig, came up, who I spoke to afterwards. I sought him out amongst the crowd and had a long chat with him about perhaps whether in the future he might come and do some work with us.
Yeah.
But he stood up and he said, I'm the father of two children. I'm married and I'm the father of two children. And I work in the building industry. He said, but when I was a kid, no one ever spoke to me except as a number or a case. And he talked a bit about his family background, and he was on his own.
Yeah.
And he said, I was involved in crime and was constantly sitting in offices for the police and the social service, but I was always a number, always a case. And then somebody pointed to this big woman with a turban on, you know, Camilla Batman Gay, well known on her.
Yeah.
And they said, you should talk to her. And he said, I'm not talking to her. She looks like a fruitcake.
Yeah.
And she literally looked like a fruitcake sometimes because of her. But he said, in the end, I went and sat with her. And for the first time in my whole life, and he was crying as he said this, somebody saw me. I was a person, not a number, not a case. And then he said, and that's why I'm alive.
Wow, that's so powerful. It's that, I was thinking just as you were telling that story, you know, that it's that, I think it's from South Africa, that saying where the way that they greet people is not, hi, how are you? It's, I see you.
Yeah.
And the response is, I am here. There's something about being seen, isn't there? And like, I know, you know, about, it's not Michael Bublé, it's Martin Buber, a philosopher.
Who lived a bit before.
Yeah, Michael Bublé. But he talked about this, didn't he? The I-thou relationship and the I-it.
Well, he wrote a very famous book in the 1920s. I can never quite remember when, 1922. No, 4 or 5 or 6, something like that. In German. It was German.
Yeah.
So he wrote it in German, and then it was another 10 years or so before it was published in English. And in English, it was called I-thou. And it said that all our relationships in life are I-it relationships, or they can become I-thou, and said that some people never have any I-thou relationships, even with themselves. And the difference between an I-it and an I-thou is what we've just been talking about. An I-it relationship is when you objectify the other person. So, you know, we say, I've got a new bag. I've got my bike. It's a good bike. Look at my watch. I've got a big telly. You know, I've got a new coat. I want my holidays coming up. And then we talk about my friend, my boss, my colleague.
It's all possessions.
My clients, my case.
Yeah.
My case. I'm dealing with this case and that case. Their number, whatever is on my list. And he said, we end up in a position, if we're not careful, where the whole world revolves around us and everybody else is just a bit player in our lives, and it's transactional. They serve a function. My producer, very handy.
Yeah. Thanks, Pete.
Do you see?
Yeah.
Rather than an I-thou relationship, which is about the meeting of two people and gazing into the eyes of the other person and recognizing them.
Yeah.
for who they are and honouring them
Yeah.
as equal to yourself.
So what suggestions are there? And did Buber suggest ways in which that we can get to that place of I thou?
Yeah. Well, the first thing is, I've often been asked about Martin Buber because he's hugely famous. I mean, if people not looked him up, it's
Counselling and everything, isn't it?
unbelievable
It's like massive
input he
influence.
had. It's shaping the way we think. But sometimes people have said to me, well, why did he call it I thou instead of I you, which would be a lot better? Why don't you know it's an I you rather than an I it relationship? And the reason actually is because he was German. And because he wrote in German. And in German, there are two words for you. There's the formal word for you. So if we work together, if we're colleagues, I'll talk about I and I'll talk about you, the German word for a formal relationship with another person.
Yeah.
But the second word for you in German is one of intimacy. It's one that you use when you refer and you're talking to those closest to you, people that you love, people that you care for. So you never use the word you of somebody you met at a bus stop, even though you might like them and sit and have a chat to them, you'd still use the first word you. But in German, only that second word. And we only have one word for you in English or in modern English, which is why it got translated as an I-thou relationship. It's not that just that you're not an it to me anymore, a handy, you're handy to me, transactional, because I can make this podcast with you. Yeah. And then I go home and you was just in my life for that little bit. That was convenient. We knocked that off. It's not just that you become a you, it's that you become thou. Where I see your wonder, and if you see mine, if you can dig that deep.
Right, get the special glasses on.
That might be impossible. We might have proved that Martin Buber, there was a fault in his thing. But
joking.
But then we have a really wonderful relationship because I know that you love me and I love you, and I'm never going to be worried that you're running me down behind my back, etc., and vice versa.
Yeah. And even, I know, that's really fascinating about the German language and that, but even the word thou feels more sacred, doesn't it? I know it's Old English and all the rest of it, but it feels more sacred. It feels more special. Actually, it helps me to understand the principle of the thing, which is, how do I perceive this other person? Is it a transaction or is it more than that?
Is it more? Yeah, is it more than that? And you'll know that I've worked with you in Oasis for donkeys years. How many years is that?
27, nearly 28.
Oh, boy, there you go. And equally long with Joy, who has worked very closely with me in Oasis. And there was one time, and it's sometimes raised by people as a little story now. There was one time when I was sitting in a room and people were telling me the unkind things that Joy had said about me. It's kind of what was wrong with me and, what I'd done wrong and all the rest of it. And I said to them, you're wrong. You're wrong. Do you know this happened? You're wrong. That can't be true. And they said, no, it is true. I said, no, it's not. How do you know? I said, because Joy loves me and I love Joy. We have got an I-thou relationship, which is actually one of the key relationships I was able to build Oasis, as you know, because you work closely and so hard. There's got to be total trust between two people, hasn't there? That's an I-thou relation. And I sometimes I hear people talking about that story because they realised that was the truth. Joy, I know, wouldn't have said those things in any shape or form.
Yeah.
So it's that I-thou-ness which we crave in order to thrive.
Which makes you think back to that Elmo tweet, like, what's missing for people? What's really missing for people? And, some of the things at the moment, that, if you just watched the news, you would think that everything is bad in the world. And there are lots of things that are very difficult in the world. but always there's plenty of good stuff happening too. But some of the things that we are struggling with as the world at the moment, some of the conflict and, horrible stories, situations of gang violence and stabbing and all of those kind of things. You can't help but feel that like this understanding of I thou would have such a transformational impact on all of that stuff.
I wrote a book which is called Being Human. And in it, one of the things I say is that one of the kind of classic statements of Jesus that everybody knows, whatever they believe about whether Jesus actually lived or not, they still know that Jesus said, love your neighbor as yourself. It's one of those things, do unto others as you want them to do to you, that type of thing. What Jesus actually said was love God with all your heart and soul and mind and strength, and love your neighbor the way that you love yourself. And in my book, I talk about the fact that a group called the Desert Mothers and Fathers, who lived in the 3rd century, in Egypt, in the desert, actually, that's where they were. And they were reflective people, and they sat and lived in caves, and they reflected on the teaching of Jesus. And they came to this point where they said, actually, we should do this backwards. Jesus said, love God, love and love your neighbor as you love yourself. But we should start with love yourself, love your neighbor, love God. And I've often thought that what Buber taught about I-thou relationships should be thought of in that way as well. Because I don't think that I'm ever capable of loving others and healing these divisions between us in our society. Cancel culture, and everybody rubbishes everybody else on Twitter and social media and everyone else, until I can climb out of that and not return fire with fire. And the only way to do that is to learn to love yourself, to have an I-thou relationship with yourself, which means shedding your identity and reuniting you with you.
Yeah.
I often think, I don't know if this is true. You do, well, I assume it is actually. You get in loads of meetings, my life, I get in loads of meetings with officials, government officials, and I'm not picking on government officials, but I've had a couple today. Everybody's sitting in a room and we're discussing very important, and I haven't got a clue what it's about. And I'm supposed, often I just say, there's so many acronyms and long sentences with masses of complicated words all strung together. And you're sitting there and people ask me questions, and sometimes I can't answer the question because I don't know what they said. And it's finding the courage to say, this is what I say, I'm a bit thick, I'm a bit slow. You couldn't explain that again to me. And then you can see if it's on a Teams call or a Zoom call, everyone going, phew, it's because, and then
everyone else, same position.
But it's when we're all playing at being what we're not, which we do a lot of the time. You pick up that circumstance, but we do in the whole of life, don't we? And it's like everything that separates me from being the real me. How do we shed that? And only as we come to an I-thou relationship with ourselves and at peace with ourselves and a love for ourselves, a genuine love for myself, have I not got to take it out on someone else?
Yeah. Do you think that's possible, Steve, without an awareness of the divine? Because you said it's like you come home to you. You come home to the true who you really are.
That you don't have to hide from anymore.
Yeah. Do you think that's intertwined with, maybe that's where the God piece is actually?
I do think that. And, we turned that early church mothers and fathers thing, love yourself, love others, love God, into a little course that we run at Oasis Church in Waterloo, that I developed out of the book that I'd written. And it's amazing. A lot of people say, well, I'd like to come because we do love yourself one week, love others next week, love God. and then, what this community is about on the fourth week. And people have said to me in the past, where I don't teach this anymore, others do, but people said, well, I'll come to the first one and the second one because I'd like to know about loving myself and loving my neighbour, but I don't do the God stuff. So I always say, well, fine, come to
what you want.
It's cool with me. But it's amazing that no one has ever left after that. And I've done it hundreds of times, and we don't have, no one's ever left after the 2 weeks. And it's because I think that as you come to grapple with love for yourself and self-forgiveness and self-worth, etc., and then love for others and reaching out to the person who's other than you, different to you, different ethnicity, different outlook in life, different views in life, different religion or whatever it might be. As you reach out to them and listen to them and embrace them, what you have to do is confront all the prejudices in you. And as you go through that, then it makes it harder to love yourself as you confront the prejudices. And then you realize that you need a renewal yourself. And you get to this, I need something that's transcendent. That moment, that bigger thing, that higher power, as sometimes people, that spiritual encounter, that charismatic encounter, that charismatic moment. I don't mean that in the sense that it gets used in churches. That moment of charisma that fires me, and So I find that these things fit together. Now, being the follower of Jesus I am, it doesn't surprise me.
Absolutely. There's that beautiful quote by Anthony de Mello, which says, "Behold the one beholding you and smiling." And to me, that's what that truth is, that as we come home to ourselves and are able to gaze upon ourselves with compassion and grace and all of that, what you suddenly realize is actually that is being held within the gaze of the divine. And that's breathtaking, I think. And then, like you just said, it's out of that the flow of who you are in relationship with others comes,
relationship to yourself and relationship to others. When talking about I, thou in relationship to yourself and I, thou in relationship to God and intimacy with God. Now, I'm not particularly talking about the Christian God, him, her, whatever, it's an encounter with the divine, the spiritual, something bigger than yourself, that your life finds meaning. But thing I often tell people about is the I-thou relationship with others. And, Cornelia, my wife, Connie, as I call her, Nellie, as
I can't believe you've just given that away.
No, everybody calls her Nellie. All the family call her Nellie. And they say, who's Connie? And but all our kids call her Connie, and everybody, so anyway, Nellie or Connie. Anyway, the thing is, when we first got married, her mother, who calls her Nellie, who died sadly at the beginning of COVID, Mary, who was a fantastic person. When we got married, we were 24, just turning 25, so we would have been 25 by then. People say our first year of marriage was delightful. It's gone a bit downhill since. Our first year of marriage was hell. Not on earth, but in a flat where we lived, because it was just really difficult. And actually, there was one day when Cornelia, Nellie, rang up her mum, and then phones were always attached to the wall by a long curly cable. So as I was listening, she said, I can't live with him anymore. Or I can't remember exactly what
she's done a full 24 hours.
Drive me bonkers. I want to come home. Well, I don't know what Mary, my mother-in-law, said to her. But it must have been something like that, because she didn't go home. She stayed. She stayed. And the funny thing is, it took us a gradual process to get to I, thou. I think I started our marriage with I, it, if I'm honest. I And now I've got my wife, kind of thing. And I think probably, I'm not pinning this on Cornelia, she probably felt the same about me.
Yeah.
But the result was both of us were trying to change the other into a version of ourselves, and couldn't understand why we had different outlooks and things. And the journey of our marriage, which is 43 and a half years, I think now we've been married, it's been a long time. So is the journey to, I think if Cornelia was here, she'd say this: I no longer want her to be me or anything like me, and vice versa. And I think that is as you reach an I thou. Now, I say that to you and it sounds like idyllic, but probably when I get home, she'll tell me off for something. Do you know what I mean? So we're on that. Healing isn't a destination, it's a process. We're all on the journey.
Absolutely. So a Jewish Kabbalistic word, Zimzum, which I think I'm right in saying that is this notion of, in order to create, God had to make space for that which needed to be created. So there's like this. So for you and Corny, you had to create space for one another to be who you are. And I think that's, Steve, as you've talked about the I-thou relationship, we need to get better, don't we, at creating that space which is full of creativity and potential and richness and joy and life, where good can come between people. So, we need to, as we start to think about bringing this particular conversation to a close, I'm just wondering what's a way that people can do that, do you think? Just how do you create that space?
I'm thinking two different thoughts as you speak. The first is, there's a little phrase occurs in the Bible that I was taught as a kid when I went to go to Sunday school. Do you find God in the storm? Do you find him in the noise? And then there's a little phrase that says, the still small voice. And I think some of it is about stopping to listen for the still small voice of the divine, of hope, of the transcendent, something beyond yourself. And I guess, even in those tough days when Corny and I were first married, after we argued about whatever we were arguing about, you sit down, don't you, on your own eventually, and you re-regulate, and you gaze in and you listen to your own stupidity played back to you. And you know that, though I couldn't have said it then because I don't think I'd ever read anything by Martin Buber back then, but now I'd say I knew that I was seeking after an I-thou relationship rather than an I-it, and I knew that I knew it was my problem, and I guess Corny also knew it was her problem. And what we slowly learned to do was actually move from it to you to thou, where we are about 95% of the time, except for the bits where we're not. And the other thing I think that arises out what you say is the need for community, because I talked about Mary, my mother-in-law. Now, she could have said, I always knew you married a wrong one, come on home or whatever. But I think that's one of the great things about marriage, actually. It's about community. And before the law ever got involved and the church got involved with marriage, it was about two communities coming together and celebrating a relationship and then sticking behind these people. And I know that our marriage was made strong because of my mother-in-law. Do you know? She was there. Belonging to community. Lots of people say, that's why I'm a lover of church, actually, because it's community. It doesn't matter if you like singing songs or not. It's actually, you belong to a community where you are loved and known, not just like get down the pub because you buy everyone around, but you're loved and known and upheld by people who you're just another at one level. It doesn't matter if you're the chief executive of this or the leader of that or whatever. You're just a person. You're just, in my case, I'm Steve, in this community. That's a wonderful thing, because you're known and loved and held, and your rough edges are knocked off, etc., etc. And it's hard, but it's wonderful. I often say to people, there's only, because people say, oh, it's tough belonging to a community long term. And I always say, yeah, there's only one thing harder. It's not belonging to a community long term. It's where you discover I, thou, instead of I, it.
Thank you, Steve. I, thou, community. So behold the one, beholding you and smiling.